r/AskReddit. People that have defended your home against intruders. What is your story? I've written about this before, but it may have been under a different username. September 1998. I'm a 22-year-old mom, at home on the computer in the front room, while my kid napped in the adjoining room. Front door swings open and a Hispanic guy, around 5 feet 6 inches, and 180 walks in. I wasn't initially alarmed as we had a Hispanic family move in a few doors up the street recently, and I figured he was in the wrong place. I tell him calmly he is looking for the other house. He gives no inclination of understanding. I more forcefully tell him and again nothing. At this point, I'm getting alarmed. I'm tiny, 5 feet 3 inches, 90 pounds at the time, and the room is a simple office, not a lot of weapons. The third time I yell for him to get out. My biggest fear is waking the kid who hasn't been sleeping long. For some reason I looked at the kid's closed door when I yelled, and the intruder followed my gaze. Then he took a step towards my kid's room. In that moment I knew I would die before I would let him through that door. A quick survey of my surroundings reminded me I had scissors in my pencil cup on the desk. I buried those scissors so far into his abdomen I cut my own hand on the handle. Then I jerked them towards me as hard as I could. Blood went everywhere. His eyes got huge, and then he ran back out the door. The police followed the blood trail for several blocks, but assume he was picked up when the trail stopped. They sent an officer to every hospital in the area, but he never went for treatment. I had to have HIV tests for 2 years after, since our blood mingled. No idea what happened to him, but he lost a lot of blood. To this day I lock my door, even if I'm just going to the car. My kid still rolls his eyes when I tell him I would hurt someone intending to do him harm. This was a weird one. Playing a video game one night, just me and a headset, friends on the other end. My house faces a busy street and a bus stop. I had my front door open to let a nice breeze in. I'm seated with my back to the door. I straight up jump out of my seat when I hear the screen door open and some fucking dude I've never seen before walks into my house. I grabbed my acoustic guitar, which was very conveniently within arm's reach at the time, because I was highly alert at this point. I was very definitely in fight or flight mode, and since I was in my home, and my wife was in the bedroom, obviously I was ready to fight. Dude wasn't holding a weapon, I was. I handled it surprisingly well. It started out with a "Whoa, what the fuck are you doing in my house? You need to leave my house." As I wielded my guitar with obvious intent to use it if necessary. Dude claims that he knocked. He's so fucked up. Keeps trying to walk further into my home, trying to explain something to me instead of turning around. So I start repeating, "You need to get the fuck out of my house, then we can talk." I shouted for my wife to wake up and grab her phone because she might need to call the cops, and that's when Jude backed up and left the house. I tried to ask him what his deal was outside, but he just told me, "You're gonna call the cops, man," and started walking. One of the weirdest things that ever happened to me, and I wondered whether I had almost died. Also, same location, maybe a year or two earlier. I wake up to hear some noise outside my window, followed by noise against my window. Then I get crazy fucking intuition reflexes and grab my wife, pulling her out of sleep and away from the window as glass breaks inward and falls where her head was. I immediately start aggressively shouting expletives and then yell for my roommate to wake up and grab his gun. Next I hear the sound of running and a car starting. I don't believe that anyone was trying to break into my house, although that's definitely possible. I think what actually happened is that my upstairs neighbors got drunk with some friends and their friend drove home drunk after falling into my window and fearing for his life when I started threatening to shoot him. Not me personally, but my dog has defended my home multiple times from thieves and potential home invaders. He's a Yorkie poo, so he's not that big, but he's very protective of the family. Once when we were living in a rental house after just moving to this new town, he started barking in the middle of the night and a guy was hiding out in our bushes. The police came around soon after and grabbed the guy. Apparently they'd been looking for him over some kind of drug offense. I don't really know why they'd been chasing him. We live in a college town, and another time during homecoming week he barked at a guy outside our kitchen window peeing on the lawn. Dude beat it as soon as he heard. And then this other time apparently happened while I was away at college. We'd moved into better house since the other times. He started barking in the middle of the night for my mom to put him out, but he just keeps barking and is looking at my brother's truck. My mom takes a look and can't really tell, but she can see some things under there. Just as she gets up, a guy slid out and started running in the other direction. There'd been some car thefts in the area before, so she called the cops and they got the guy. So yeah, TLDR, my dog might be small, but he's pretty good at sensing trouble and isn't afraid to go let us know when to look out. He's a cool little dude. A few years ago I had just moved back into my mom's house to take care of her. It was a small house in what had been a fairly quiet area, but most of the residents were near the same age and circumstance as my mom. So a good number of the houses had been flipped or had young renters, and our previously low crime rates had increased. One night I was up late watching TV. It was one of the few times around then I didn't have to work the next day or take mom to an appointment, so I was enjoying some time to relax alone. Around 2:30 am I was getting ready for bed when heard someone trying to get in the front door. We had a keypad lock where you punch in a code then turn the deadbolt. They were pushing buttons and turning the lock part that doesn't actually do anything until you enter the right code. I have had nightmares about this exact thing for years, so was pretty freaked out. I looked through the peephole and saw a guy in a winter coat punching buttons like crazy. I started shouting at him that I was calling the cops to go away, just anything to try to scare him away. He pounded on the door shouting back to let him in. I dialed 911 and kept shouting. Suddenly he said sorry and walked away, nearly falling off the step. The shouting woke up mom, so she was trying to make her way out to the living room and asking what was going on as I'm talking to the 911 operator. She got even more freaked out than me as I tried to explain to both of them. We look out different windows to make sure he's gone and only see his tracks in the snow. After a bit the cop cars showed, but no one came to our door yet. They went to look for the guy first. Since the snow is pretty fresh and it's not a neighborhood where people walk other than to take their dogs out, it didn't take long to find him. They walked him back to their car to talk to him and shined a flashlight at where we were peeking out the windows to let us know they saw us. When they were done talking, one of the cops came to our door to talk. Apparently the guy was incredibly drunk, had just driven home from a bar, amazingly not crashing in the process, and forgot which house he lived in. The address on his license was around the corner and a few down from us. He somehow thought he lived in our house, even though it is literally the only one in the neighborhood with a hedge, and he climbed through it to get to the front door. He got to spend the night in the drunk tank and was charged with public intox. Moved from extremely rural Eastern Oregon to my first apartment in ghetto Eugene, Oregon. It's funny, people are like there's no ghetto in Eugene. And I'm like it was on the corner of 7th and Monroe, and they just go oh. Like there was this 426 block radius of absolute fucking bullshit. Fights, puking, needles everywhere, crack whores, kids getting beaten at odd hours, and garbage. Fucking garbage everywhere. I swear to God, people from nice parts of town would forget to take the trash to the curb and just drive it to my neighborhood and throw it on a sidewalk. Random tires, random furniture would appear and disappear. A car would stay parked for months in the same location, then suddenly you'd see it caught on fire at some point. The fireman would put the fire out and just leave it, lol. Fucking ghetto as fuck. And I was such a fucking hick in the middle of all of it. So one day this homeless Mexican guy shows up on my doorstep. It was dead of winter, so it was raining like a motherfucker because fuck you, Eugene, Oregon. Fuck you and your shitty winters so much. I'm hanging out in boxers, a tank top, long ass white sweet socks, and a fat bowl of weed when dude knocks on my door. No idea who he was. I say what's up dude and he's just shivering. He has chinos and a lousy t-shirt. Poor fucker was freezing, teeth chattering, fucking soaked. He says cold. So cold. Well, shit. I'm not an asshole. My mom sent me with like a dozen big giant coats and blankets because she worried. Bless her heart. So I'm like hang on dude and I go grab a thick ass coat and blanket. I can afford it. So I'm like here ya go man. And he puts it all on. Thank you. Thank you. Then he keeps standing there. Starts looking inside. I'm like okay you gotta go now dude. No. Excuse me. No. He starts pushing his way inside. Oh, you motherfucker. I grab this T-ball wooden bat I kept behind my door. I called it my hippie be good stick, and something snapped. My inability to get a job. The loneliness of no one in Eugene befriending me. The bills piling up. The miserable fucking rain. I yell get the fuck out to my house. And hoist the bat over my head. He runs. I run after him. I don't know why. I just did. So there I am, mid-afternoon on a shitty Sunday afternoon, running down 7th Avenue in Eugene, in my undies and tank top, my long ass sweet socks sliding down, and flapping in the puddles, waving a bat over my head, chasing a homeless Mexican guy shouting fuck you man. Fuck you. I gave you a coat. People driving by pursing their lips like etch. This part of town is always so distasteful. I realized I must look pretty stupid. So I walk back to my apartment, my socks flapping on the sidewalk in long, awkward slaps. I round the corner and the crackhead upstairs is smoking a cigarette. She says, "The hell you doing, white boy?" and starts cackling at me. Telling all her crackhead friends, "Hey, come look at the crazy white boy." When you're comic relief for crackheads, you have been making real bad life choices. I moved the fuck out a couple months later. Some decent neighborhood by the college where trust fund brats played hacky sack and shared STDs with each other. When I was about 16 or so, my dad, brother and I were on the way home from church and saw that a truck we didn't recognize was parked in front of our house. We had a long driveway, so by the time we pulled up and parked, my dad had told my brother and I to stay in the car as he figured out what whoever it was wanted. When we got close enough, we noticed that the guy, a big dude in his 40s, easily 6 feet 6 inches with a giant beer belly, was hunched over by the front door. My dad is a teacher in a tiny town, so it wasn't a surprise that he recognized the guy. He called out, "Judd, is that you?" Judd turned, didn't acknowledge my dad at all, and hustled back to the passenger side of the mysterious truck, grasping his 10-gallon hat to his head the whole time. He threw himself in head first and, his legs still dangling out the passenger door, yelled for the driver to go. They peeled out, and we were left staring after them, wildly confused. We noticed later that he'd been trying to unlock the door with a screwdriver, but only succeeded in scraping up the door frame before we caught him. The best part? The door was unlocked the entire time. I was 12 years old hanging out with my dad watching a movie at around 1 AM. All of a sudden there is pounding on the door. My dad gets up and twists the knob. As soon as he does, the door flies open and a mountain of a man throws the door open. My dad is pretty big himself, but gets knocked to the floor, but happens to grab the guy's shirt on the way down. They start wrestling and fist fighting in the entrance of our doorway. Him standing at the top of the steps looking down and watching all of this in slow motion. My dad starts screaming to get his shotgun out of his closet. I run upstairs, grab the shotgun, run back to the top of the steps and pump around into the chamber. Immediately after hearing the sound, the guy tries to run away, but my dad holds him down on the ground. At this time my neighbors had heard the yelling and scuffle and ran over. They call the police, while my dad is holding this guy against the ground, and me, a 12-year-old kid, aiming a shotgun at the back of this dude's head. The police end up coming with their guns drawn, and I put the shotgun on the sidewalk. The guy ends up getting arrested and supposedly had just gotten out of jail for a strong-arm robbery and battery. I can't even imagine what would have happened if I had been alone, considering my dad has worked third shift my entire life, but it just happened on one of his nights off. My dad was literally a superhero to me after that day. Edit. So to address the question of why my dad answered the door at 1 AM. This is because we live in a pretty safe area and we have neighbors who drop by sometimes. My dad had thought maybe a neighbor was drunk and wanted to come and visit. This happens from time to time. The last thing we ever would expect is someone to try and force their way in. Another note: I don't care about the correct way to say all of a sudden. So there's that. I was home alone on a Saturday night and my roommate had left for the weekend. We often left the side door unlocked for friends who would go downstairs and crash on the couch. I would frequently hear it as they would come in. So I'm laying in bed in my birthday suit reading a book at 2 AM and I hear the screen door open. My dog perks up at the noise. He's a 110-pound shepherd Newfie mix that looks like a wolf. He lets out a little boof. Leaning forward in bed, I can see the doorway. I look and see the door knob turning. "Hello," I shout, thinking it was a friend. It was not a friend. A strange man's head poked through the door. We make eye contact. He has this weird look on his face as he proceeds into the landing. "A wrong house," I screamed, thinking he was just in the wrong home. When I screamed, my dog got up and went to my bedroom doorway. The guy stopped in his tracks. My dog's hackles raised and he started snarling. I was even scared by him a bit. The guy stopped when he saw my dog and started backing up. "Get the fuck out of my house," I screamed. My dog jumped. The guy fell backwards into the door and my dog grabbed him by the leg and shook him like a rag doll. I stopped caring about being naked at this point. I jumped out of bed and threw on my housecoat while this guy was screaming bloody murder. Blood all over the floor. I grabbed my dog's back leg and sat down on the floor trying to hold on to him. The guy stumbled to his feet and grabbed the door knob before looking back. He took a glance at me with my robe hanging open and my dog still snarling at him. "I will let him go," I screamed again. My dog jumped and I did my best to hold on, but one leg got out of my grasp and he lunged out at the guy. The guy finally turned and fell out of the door. I immediately got up and locked it. There's blood all over my floor. My dog's fur is still raised as he stands at the door growling. I called the police. They came, took a statement and left. I never found out what happened to the guy. I took my dog to the vet and he was fine. I never left the side door unlocked again. I've never been so thankful for my dog. My wife was at home without me. Midday, she is in the front of the house in the living room. She hears the gate to our privacy fence open and then close. She looked out the window to see a man she didn't know walking along our house through our backyard. Our dogs were both home with her. We had a boxer and a boxer Rottweiler mix. She went to the back of the house to lock the back door, but by the time she got there, the guy had already started to open the back door. She tried to push the door shut on him, but he was much bigger than she was, and he pushed his way into the house, knocking her on the floor. Both dogs jumped over her. One of them actually used her as a launching pad and broke one of her ribs and went at the guy. Both dogs connected and latched on and began to tear his arm and leg up pretty Ann. My wife had the wherewithal to get her phone out and call 911. The guy tried to leave and run, but our mutt, Boxer Rotti, pulled him into the house and kept at him until the police arrived. My wife was finally able to pull both dogs off of him and get away once the cops arrived. He was charged with breaking and entering as he had broken our gate. He spent 3 days in a hospital getting 2 surgeries to repair his arm and leg from the dog injuries. He deserved them. Fuck that guy. Since that, we have always had large dogs. We now have a boxer and 2 English mastiffs. My wife still gets edgy when home alone. Fucked up for sure. I was 14 and home alone. We were living in a crappy part of nowhere in Knoxville, Tennessee at the time. Someone drove up and knocked on our sliding glass door. I was nervous, but I stayed silent. Then they tried to force the door open. but it was held shut with a pole, so they gave up and drove away. I figured that was the end of it. Shortly thereafter, they came back. I heard the sound of someone pressing against the exterior wall. It was them cutting the phone lines to our security system and the alarm speaker. By then I was on the phone with 911 informing them what was happening. Heavy thudding started to come from the front door as someone bashed it in, breaking the deadbolt. I was terrified and pleaded with 911 to please get someone out here right away. Whoever it was must have heard me talking on the phone, because they immediately left, although the front door was broken and wide open. It took the cops another 20 minutes to arrive. The person who broke in the door must have cut himself doing it, because our porch had droplets of blood on it. My dad screamed at me for not getting a license plate number while I cried. The people who broke in were never caught, and I've never felt safe anywhere since. I had nightmares for a long time. Edit. I want to say thank you to all the people who correctly pointed out that my father's an asshole. I know some people suggested that he was just acting out of fear and that maybe he wasn't so bad otherwise. Unfortunately, no, my dad is a horrible person. He's extremely abusive and his reaction to everything is screaming. He used to have our phone line tapped just so if anyone said anything he didn't like, he could punish us later. I spent my entire childhood getting to hear about how I am worthless and ugly and a waste of space. I moved away from him as soon as I could when I was 17. Whether or not this was an attempted murder is up for debate. It was 1 AM and I was home from college. My brother was a senior in high school asleep in his room, my mom in her bedroom. I heard the utility door to the back of the garage struggle to slowly open. So I assumed my brother was trying to sneak out. I texted him, got no response. I then heard the door shut. I left my bedroom and went to his to see if he had left, but he was asleep in his bed. I walked up to the bed and said, "Wake up, someone is in the house." It was weird, because I was the only one awake hearing these things and I didn't have much time to process it, but I just knew something was off. Then I went to my mom's bedroom and said, "Wake up, someone is in the house. Call the neighbors and 911. She freaked out, of course, and called. I grabbed a baseball bat I kept by my bed and went downstairs alone. Stupid as hell, but adrenaline I guess. I walked through our big house in the dark alone and heard tripping or shuffling coming from the room that leads to the garage. I was hitting the walls and doors yelling who is there as I got closer in hopes of scaring whoever it was away. Once I was about 6 to 10 feet from the room I slammed the bat on the door to the room and yelled again for the person to leave. I heard a crash and the outside door slam. I flipped on the light and no one was there. I went back upstairs to my mom and brother. The police were on the way. When they arrived they brought dogs and also found prying marks on the outside door. A couple blocks down the road my addict, schizophrenic dad was arrested, leaving the direction of our house and intoxicated. He has always owned weapons and has left threatening messages for us before, but never anything like that. I have no proof it was him and no proof he was coming to kill or hurt us, but I had a gut feeling immediately something very dark was in that house. Last year I was staying in a duplex in the shittiest part of town. I was home alone and someone knocked on the front door. I thought it was my husband coming home from work early, so I excitedly opened the door, only to see it was a man who I've never seen before. I closed the door halfway and asked if I could help him. He didn't say anything and barged in my living room. I ran to my bedroom and tried to lock the door, but I wasn't fast or strong enough. He cornered me and pulled out a knife and told me not to move. He saw some money I had on my computer desk and grabbed that. I told him he could take whatever, but just hurry and leave. He just kept telling me to shut up. Finally he held the knife to my neck and told me he was going to have sex with me and to get on my bed. I knew I wasn't strong enough to fight him off, so I tried to lighten the situation by laughing and saying he didn't need the knife and I'd just do whatever he wanted. He kept saying, "Get on the bed," over and over. I got on the bed and he started to unbutton my pants. I was holding my hands up to show I wasn't going to do anything. Then as he looked down I reached for my doorbell that was on my bedside table. I had just replaced the battery and hadn't put it back outside yet and pressed the button making the chime go off. He freaked out and ran outside. I immediately ran up and locked my front door and called 911 and my husband. I never got a good look at him as he was wearing a zipped up hoodie and it was dark. Everything just happened so fast. There were no witnesses and he was never caught. I still have trouble being home alone without having a panic attack and I always lock my door and have weapons hidden all over the house. I've moved since then to a much better area so that's helped a bit. Not my home, but neighbor's property. Lived on the border between the hood and a college campus in a major Midwestern city. Gated apartment community. Supposedly upscale according to the brochure. Heard glass shatter outside, then again, etc. Walked outside and see a car creeping between the parked cars in the lot and a guy going car to car ripping out the center consoles and tossing them behind each car near the creeping car. I have a very deep voice, so I yelled, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" I see a couple guys pop out from behind the cars and run like hell to the creeper car, then scream out of the parking lot, right through the closed gate. Mission accomplished. Went around picking up people's stereos and consoles and bringing them into my unit, then writing notes for each car with my phone number to return their belongings. Those assholes managed to hit 5 cars in that short amount of time. Police didn't even bother to come when I reported it. We can't send out a unit unless the owner of the property calls it in. WTF. 4 years ago, I got in an argument at a party that escalated into a minor fight. The other guy was an old friend who had recently moved back to town after living elsewhere for a decade. After the scuffle, we made up, hung out for another hour or so, and I walked him most of the way to his house. Mine was only 3 blocks away from his. Woke up in a dead panic a couple hours later to the sound of glass breaking. Someone was battering my garage door trying to get through and not being quiet about it. I called 911, explained my situation, and posted up next to my living room door with a baseball bat. I left the phone on the ground still on the line with emergency. The intruder made it through the last door and I attacked with the bat. Connected about 5 or 6 solid hits to the head and 1 to the ribs before the intruder collapsed. Turned on the light and I recognized this person. It's the wife of the guy I fought with the evening before. She had a weapon on her too. Police came, ambulance took her away, and everyone left after a few hours. It was awful. She admitted to trying to attack me in my sleep to the police. I declined to press charges after speaking with her husband, so long as she got adequate psychological help. She spent 2 months in ICU, but ultimately pulled through. She's been nothing but a nightmare to everyone I know since then. Edit for all these questions. I didn't press charges because I was really hungover and confused, was not completely aware that she was coming to hurt/kill me, and I did not know she had a weapon with her at the time. I only saw a picture of the weapon a few months later. Also, the night before, I threw the first punch and this guy was kind enough not to call the cops on me, so I felt like I owed him. When the police spoke to her, it was a few weeks after the incident, after she awoke from a coma. It wasn't a formal request by the police, they were questioning me about the whole thing, and I said I wanted to speak to her husband before pursuing charges. I spoke with him a little while later, and he begged me not to, so I didn't. He painted her as having a serious drinking problem which caused her to do this. Everyone involved, including myself, was extremely drunk or hungover during the whole incident. One of my first apartments was on the ground level, with a patio off the living room, that I lived in with my now ex-boyfriend. TT had a full-time job and fairly good income at 21 years old, had a lot of somewhat expensive toys and some shady friends. He would often go out of state to visit family and friends on the weekend and I would stay behind to work. One weekend night, when T was out of town, one of his friends I had only met a few times knocked on our patio door. He seemed really scattered, was looking for T, and trying to see past me into the apartment, but since T wasn't home, and I didn't know him very well, I wouldn't let him in. and he eventually left. A couple nights later, T and I were in the living playing video games and heard a knock on the patio door. It was the same friend, but this time he brought someone with. Both were dressed in hoodies with bandanas covering their faces and were carrying large bags. They demanded the video game consoles and a few other things, but when he refused they started fighting. I grabbed my phone and tried to run for the hallway, but the friend chased me and grabbed me. He got my phone, but I was able to elbow him and kick him to get away and ran into the hall and started yelling for help. One of my neighbors called the police. I'm still not sure exactly what happened while I was in the hall, but either two guys didn't actually get anything, but they did smash the TV before running. Since T knew one of the guys and was familiar with the car he drove, the police were able to find the car fairly quickly with the bandanas and bags. We had to follow up as witnesses, but the two guys ended up confessing and spent a year in jail. I came home late one night, and when I put my key in the door, it was already unlocked. I know I locked my door because I do the deadbolt and door knob, and as I walked up the light didn't turn on. That light stays on. It's motion sensor, so there's no reason to turn it off. Something was up, so I grabbed my gun out of my truck. As I was walking back up to the door I had 911 dialed and the fucking dude who broke in meets me at the door. He was holding something, so my first instinct was that he also had a gun. I fired 4 shots as he took off through my house, and back out the window he came through in my spare bedroom. He severed his hamstring on some sheet metal in my neighborhood's backyard. He was a heroin and oxy addict that was responsible for several car and home burglaries. Contrary to how the media and movies try to portray it, I felt like a fucking idiot because I just fired 4.45 rounds in a neighborhood when both of my neighbors in the direction I fired have kids. I had a looming sense of what if guilt for a long time. And the total time from me parking to firing was less than 30 seconds. Only thing I can say was the cop complimented my shot grouping. I apologized so many times to my neighbors, but they were cool about it. They understood the fractions of a second that I had to make a decision.